Coming off winning the Academy Award, William Friedkin delivered the world the greatest and scariest horror movie ever made. It sent people running out of the theater, made others puke in the aisles, and left deep welting scars on those who dared finish the film. To this day, it's largely regarded as the scariest film ever made. And on top of that, it's the ninth highest grossing film of all time when adjusted for inflation. Stanley Kubrick was not to be outdone. Trying his hand at horror, he adapted the Stephen King novel The Shining and made a film that left audiences terrified, traumatized, confused, in thought, and wanting more. The Shining continues to be one of the most popular horror films ever made, despite what the original author would tell you. Two iconic filmmakers dabbling in the horror genre, only one will remain on Horror Face Off. All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Horror Face Off. Today we have The Exorcist versus The Shining, and we have an all-female panel. The first time we've had this. And we're going to start off with Mia. Where are you from? And tell us what's going on.
Hi, everyone. My name's Mia. I am just a little outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the zombie capital. And my boyfriend and I make independent horror films, and we have an entire horror room in our house, and we just basically live and breathe it.
Awesome. Emma, how you doing?
I'm questions. Good. What's that?
Same questions. Where are you from? What's going on?
So, hey, everyone. I'm Emma. I'm from Toronto, Canada, and live here with my husband, my two sons, none of whom like horror. I'm the black sheep of the family, and I'm forced to watch horror by myself, which actually makes it better. But happy to be here today. These are two of my favorite films of all time, so it's going to be hard to pick one. But I'm a recovering lawyer turned writer, and some of what I write is horror fiction, short stories, and I'm working on a novel right now that's sort of a psychological thriller about a horror writer. So it's horror adjacent, I would call it.
Oh, that's fascinating. But recovering lawyer, is that a term, or is that you?
It is. I
that?
invented it, and I don't think I say that. I'm probably not the only person who uses it. And Jason, for Mia and Allie and viewers, Jason and I actually met working at a law firm together.
That's true.
So we bonded over horror, and we've been friends ever since.
And I got to try and recover from that too, because that was a traumatizing period of my life.
Archivist.
Allie, the first ever second appearance on Horror Face Off. There's many more to come, but welcome back.
Brought my face back. Hi.
We didn't break you. The hurricane didn't take you away.
Nothing can kill me.
Nothing can kill you. Good stuff. Well, thank you, ladies, for being here. And we're gonna get right to it, because this one's heavy. For me anyway, and it sounds like, for Emma as well. So we're going to start off with the stories of these films, and we're going to lead off with Allie, and you know the drill. I think
my favorite storyline is The Shining. I like, that's the question, right? Which is our favorite storyline. I love everything about Jack. Jack and Danny's storyline is my favorite. I've never read the book. I need to say that now. I've never read either of the books. So I can't really compare. I've known a little bit of the differences. It's hard to say, but if we're talking movies, I know The Shining is my favorite story.
Okay, cool.
That was all over the place, but
no, it was all good. It was poignant. Someone who I'm guessing did read it is Emma. Did you?
Read the book.
Okay. All right. So let's throw to you. Now, this is the movie. This isn't the book, so we don't have to worry about the comparisons. They might happen in our explanations, which is fine. But story of Exorcist versus story of Shining. Go.
Okay, so can I ask a question first? Are you going to be talking about acting or character in a separate category? Okay.
Yes.
Storyline, definitely The Shining. I agree with Allie. I think the whole story, to me, it's about trauma. It's about inherited trauma, sort of the wrongs people sort of perpetuate against each other. Jack hurts his son, he hurts his wife. And there's a whole backstory in the novel that I think that's a conversation for another day. But if you've read the book, you have this sort of full background of Jack's past. Jack had an abusive father who used to drink, who beat his mother. So there's this whole critical backstory to how trauma sort of comes down generationally. And even it exists in the hotel. It's why I love the sort of remnants of like the blood in the elevators, the people in costume, the dead twins, all those little bits and pieces. The hotel is sort of a breeding ground for trauma, like on a macro level. And then you've got the micro level, the family that's staying there and how that exists within the family unit. And I just think it's so meaningful and so powerful and so personal too. Whereas The Exorcist for me is more evil's this arbitrary thing. Maybe it might choose to possess you, maybe it won't. So it's, to me, it's not as powerful. I'm also not religious. I think maybe if I was religious, Christian, Catholic, whatever, The Exorcist might, I mean, I love The Exorcist, don't get me wrong, but I might have a different reaction. So I will say that.
Okay. So you're going with.
I'm going with The Shining. Yeah.
All right. So Mia, you're up.
I'm also going to agree with the ladies, The Shining for storyline for me as well, because when you compare the two, not that The Exorcist isn't amazing and sucks you in, but The Shining has so many different levels and different parallels. And when you're done at the end of the day watching both of those movies, I think The Shining really has a lot more to leave you with and leave you thinking about, whereas The Exorcist, I feel, is a little more kind of cut and dry, demon type, scary stuff. You know, The Shining has so many different layers to it that it's just more interesting at the end of the day, and you go to bed still thinking about, oh, I wonder what this meant, and I wonder what this could have gone to. And then now there's documentaries about that, about the different things that The Shining could have meant, and that's why I think that one is the more interesting storyline for me.
Nice. I'd like to disagree, but I can't. Definitely, I think The Shining adds a lot more layers to the onion than Exorcist. Not necessarily that that's always a good thing. In this case, it is. So you think you three all said it very well. So I'll just agree and say The Shining. And now we move on to the setting. And I'm going to throw it to Emma.
Oh, great. Oh, why do you have to ask about the setting? Okay, I'm going to debate a little bit with myself internally.
Okay,
Feel
we'll
free to
watch.
jump in, and then hopefully I'll be able to make a decision. So I love horror movies set in fall or winter. That's just me. I'm more of a fall winter horror movie person. So both The Exorcist and The Shining have that going for them. Like I think Washington, D.C. in the fall, this sort of the leaves blowing, the score, the kids at one point when Ellen Burstyn is walking home, I think it's from the first time we see her at a movie shoot, she's walking home, the score kicks in, there's little kids in costume running past her. There's the nuns and their habits. It's just a very effective scene. And the house is powerful too. The house with its sort of nooks and crannies, the attic with the rats in it, or so she thinks there's rats in it. I always love those old sort of 70s or 80s houses, and it just feels like there's so much there. It's not this brand new sparkling subdivision. There's like a real character there. But in The Shining, I mean, I don't know that there's anything better than an empty hotel to set a movie in. I mean, think of just the space stretching out around you and you're there over the winter. All right, I'm gonna have to go with The Shining. I just had to work that out in my own mind.
Got it.
But
So
I have to say, I do love actually both settings in The Exorcist, the city in the fall feeling like you're in this horrible thing is happening, but the city's just going on around you like everything's normal.
Yeah.
And just, I also love the opening where Max von Sydow is in Iraq, and just the heat and the intensity, and he's wandering these little cobblestone streets, and he's just a stranger in a strange land type of thing. So it's close, but I think The Shining ultimately is so effective, The Hotel.
Mia.
Well, being the big 70s nerd that I am, I also love 70s homes, 80s homes, and The Shining, or not The Shining, The Exorcist does a really good job at that. And I think for me, it's hard not to want to pick The Exorcist because I have been there twice. I've walked the steps, I've stood outside the house. The light posts are the same. It's crazy. And so when you watch a movie after you've been to a filming location, it feels a lot different. However, I feel that it doesn't lend as much to the movie as The Shining does. The hotel is a character in itself, in my opinion. And the fact that it's winter and it's deserted is just scary, let alone the stuff that's happening inside of the hotel. And there's so many different iconic things about The Shining that when you think of The Exorcist and you think of The Shining, you can kind of think of like the DVD cover of, you know, the priest standing underneath the light post, but there's so much more iconic imagery that comes to your mind when it comes to The Shining, with the twins and the carpet and just the outside and the maze. The maze for me is really atmospheric, and I love labyrinths like that alone, let alone in a horror film. So for me, The Shining 100% takes the cake, even though I haven't actually been there.
All right, Allie, you're up.
Want to be cool and different and say that I vote for The Exorcist. I love The Exorcist in its setting, but The Shining, the setting is its own character. Like Mia said, like you brought up, I think it has to be The Shining because it is in its own a character, and it's isolated, and that's the whole point. Cabin fever, you can't leave, you're stuck. The Shining.
Cool.
We don't have any.
I'm gonna kind of go back a little bit to Emma's points. Like, you know, I really like how you touched on The Exorcist. And my vote's for The Shining, but I do want to say, but The Exorcist, it's and the reason why I picked The Shining is because I'm like you as well. Winter films I love. Like, you know, when I used to write more primarily for winter, and I love the isolation, I love the snow, I love that whole thing. So to me, like, you know, I look at the Overlook Hotel and I'm like, yeah, sign me up, I want to go. So what if, you know, these things happen? It looks like a pretty cool place to spend some time. But I do want to give a lot of credit to Exorcist. There's a feel to it, and there is that fall feel. There's that, like, you know, when, you know, just that establishing shot over the bridge, and, you know, and I guess, is it the Potomac River? Anyways, but there's that awesome, you know, establishing shot where it really just sets the feel, as well as like Georgetown University, and it's just like, you know, the track scene just kind of brings you into that whole world really, really effectively in just a few quick shots. And I really, really love that. Like, it's hard for me not to go with it, but at the end of the day, you know, an isolation in the middle of winter hell is, you know, definitely going to get my vote. So The Shining is off to a really, really good start, ladies.
Yeah.
Filmmaking. We're going to start with Mia.
Okay, for me, this is incredibly hard because Kubrick is a mastermind, and he did so many different things. We can talk about the Shelley Duvall thing 138 times or whatever. But I watched a documentary, I want to say maybe about a year ago, and it was strictly just on how how do you say his last name? Friedkin
Friedkin
shot The Exorcist, and it sat down with him, and it was strictly just on how he made The Exorcist. And the things that he said that he did, he lit certain scenes based on Renaissance paintings, and then they would show a Renaissance painting and his scene. And he was so thorough about it, and he really held that movie with great care and wanted everything to be dealt with such intention. And not that I don't think Kubrick does that, because I do, but I know that Kubrick's just an asshole with a lot of things. And now that creates greatness, but just like in A Clockwork Orange, he knew that Malcolm McDowell had a big fear of snakes, so he made him have a pet snake, and he just psychologically tortured Shelley Duvall. And while it makes for great acting and great scenarios to capture on film, I just can't really get behind that. And I think you can do it without being an asshole, and Friedkin definitely does that. And if you watch that documentary, there's just so much he goes into, and he really worked with Blatty on, you know, the novelization with the, you know, the movie version. And for me, it's gonna have to be The Exorcist.
Cool. Well, I'll chime in here. I guess that documentary didn't really show how Friedkin was an ass as well, because he was slapping actors. He was really pushing them to their breaking points. So if Friedkin does not have a good reputation as a nice man. Yeah. So
I'm not changing my answer, but still.
No. But you're not wrong. I think they're both assholes. And I think Friedkin is probably less of one. So you're not wrong, but there was definitely things that he did on that set that you know, again, he probably could have had a better career, but I think, you know, reputation kind of caught up to him a little bit. I think Kubrick shot The Shining beautifully. It was awesome. Can't say, you know, too many negative things about it, but I am going to give the edge to Exorcist and Friedkin, because Exorcist is a brilliant film, because, and maybe I should have said this a little bit more in the story, but like, to me, The Exorcist has always been just basically a detective film with these absolutely horrifying elements in it. You know, you really look at the scenes where, you know, Ellen Burstyn is being, you know, questioned by the detective, and it's just got this pace to it that is just so unlike any other horror film. You know, you almost feel kind of safe at times, and then, you know, the sound design is just insane on both films, but in The Exorcist, the way Friedkin worked with sound, not just with the devil, but like just things in the attic, and just the way music wasn't quite music at times, but it was just freaky and unsettling. I think that The Exorcist, and he was coming off The French Connection too, which is another one of my favorite films. I think The Exorcist is a brilliantly shot film. And it almost doesn't get the credit it deserves, because it's always just like, oh, it's a scary film. And that is one of the things that, you know, he's not a horror director. He's just a brilliant director who made an awesome horror film because of his talent. And you can say the same about Kubrick, but I'm going to give it to Friedkin. And sorry if I ran. Yes, Mia, you have your hand up. Yes. We're just going to take over the show.
I agree with you. That's something else I wanted to add. I think the scares are more effective in The Exorcist, which also kind of adds to why I picked that. But also too, I don't know if anybody has ever caught this, there's a helicopter in the beginning opening shots of The Shining that is like an oops.
Yeah,
and I know Kubrick never did anything, you know, everything was on purpose, but for me, I'm just like, did he just say that to cover up the fact that he screwed up there? So that's another, you know.
Emma's dying.
Oh no, sorry. That's always driven me crazy. You can literally see the propeller, but I'm like, oh, how did nobody notice this?
Yes.
I noticed that. I think I just learned that now.
It's
That's-
just, you can see, anyway,
This is the beauty of this show. Actually, we'll hold off on Emma. We're going to go to Allie next.
As you
Sorry,
guys
Julie.
are explaining your answers, I am recalling, I think there was a documentary. I love making of the movie documentaries, and I'm now remembering one I saw on The Exorcist years ago. Mia, maybe you know this. Didn't they build something in The Exorcist for that shot? Like, now I'm remembering something really interesting. The staircase scene in The Exorcist. Didn't they build something for that shot where the assistant and the mom are running up the stairs? Does anyone know what I'm talking about?
They built the second floor of the house. Like the house is actually.
I'm talking about for the camera, for the filmmakers themselves. They had like this chair they sat in, and I'm recalling this from a documentary I watched about The Exorcist. I'm like positive that was not a dream.
I can't recall to confirm, but I'm not saying that you're wrong. I just like I said, it's a year ago since I watched that other documentary. I don't remember a whole lot, but.
And Jason, the question is about directing. Who's our favorite director?
Yeah. Well, just, who do you think made a better film?
That question sucks. That's such a hard question. I'm such a diehard Kubrick fan. I think I don't know.
Did we sway you? It sounds like you were going to probably say Kubrick, but now we're like.
Remember, I'm recalling a documentary I watched about the making of this film. I'm remembering now too that who was the script writer for the film? The script writer for The Exorcist.
William Peter Blatty?
Yes, I think he or somebody. I'm just like remembering a lot right now. There was a lot of work that went into both movies, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I had my answer ready to go, but I hate this question, you guys.
Wait, can I just clarify? I thought the question was like, what's the better movie? Not
Well, no, I
specifically
mean,
about-
it kind of, I mean, filmmaking can be that question. I mean, but
Okay.
you can kind of direct it to that question. But like, we're trying to break down these movies categorically to just kind of throw in better movie in the middle of it would kind of be a little bit of a disservice to the idea of the show. But I mean, I know what you're saying. A lot of times it's tough to differentiate, but you can sometimes. Sometimes a movie is really, really good, maybe not shot as beautifully as another film that speaks to you in that level.
Mhm.
Well,
I don't know if that helped or.
Didn't The Shining take like 5 years to film? 4 or 5 years or something like that? And
I don't know if it was that long.
It was. I thought it was like years it took to shoot that. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think I'm gonna have to change my previous answer that was in my brain, and I'm gonna have to give it to The Exorcist.
You're going with The Exorcist?
Because I do think, and I don't want to be wrong, but I think they did build their own things I'm basing my answer off of something I'm recalling from years ago. But I do think I remember them building things just for these certain shots. And I love like the work they had to do to make the room cold. I remember that the room was freezing. I know they're both really brutal. If you had to work on either set, had to be. I know that Stanley Kubrick is notorious for having tortured, like he gave Jack Nicholson his least favorite lunch every day for weeks. Like they were just doing crazy shit in the 70s, man. Time to get away with directing stuff. What's his name? Toby Hooper, same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I'm gonna have to give it to The Exorcist this time, which I need to even it out anyway. So I'm gonna give my answer to The Exorcist.
All right. Okay, so Emma, you finally get to speak. Go.
So many things. No, it's hard not to get into all the other categories because like you want to talk about the cinematography, the storyline. Well, we've talked about the story, but okay.
This is the time to bring in cinematography because we don't have that category. So
okay, so I am gonna go actually with The Shining. I'm gonna be a rebel. So, and this is, I mean, look, they're both amazing films. Clearly, that's why we're all having a tough time with our answers. I just think there's something different about The Shining. The Exorcist, to Jason's point, is just a very exceptionally well-made film. And in many ways, it isn't ultimately a horror film, right? Like you were saying, Jason, I'm not sure that I would say it's a detective film, but it could almost be like a drama film, right? With horrific elements. And it's very well done. It's very smooth. It follows like a traditional plot arc. There's sort of a hopeful, redemptive ending. It's thematically heavy. But I just think The Shining is special. I think it's incredibly scary. I think the imagery, for me personally, in The Shining is scarier. Even if The Exorcist is maybe a smoother, sort of more well.
That's a spoiler alert because Scare is coming up.
What's that? Okay. Oop, okay.
It's okay.
I won't
We'll
go
put you
there.
first on that one.
Yeah, just cut that part out. But it's just from the opening shot, following the car through the mountains, that score, the music, the sense of isolation, the exterior shot of the hotel, then all of a sudden we're in the office. You know, the sense of place, the sense of atmosphere, the confusing nature, which I'm sure we all saw the documentary. I think it's called Room 237, just about how it's confusing and the layout doesn't make any sense, but that was intentional to add to the sort of the atmosphere and be feeling lost and whatnot. So even things like, I don't know if you guys noticed this, but there's a scene where Danny and Wendy are watching TV. And it's very dark and sort of there's the TV and then the light coming from behind it through the windows. And I think he says he wants to go to his room to get his trucks or something. Mm-hmm. But if you look, there's no cord coming out of the TV. So it's like, I mean, it might've been in the documentary, but it's like, okay, so is the hotel powering the TV? I mean, it must've been intentional. So I just think there's so much going on in the film and it lends itself to so many different interpretations. I will say the one thing I don't like about Kubrick's adaptation of The Shining, and if you read the book, you would know what I mean. There's no character arc in Jack. He's sort of from that opening scene, like he's just a fucker, pardon my French. Like he's just he's sitting in Ullman's office. He's clearly got an attitude, you know, when they're driving, when he and Wendy and Danny are driving up to the hotel, they're talking about the Donner Party and he's condescending to his family. He's kind of a dick and he remains a dick and becomes violent and horrible. So that's the one part. I have no doubt that Kubrick did that intentionally. But in the book, Jack has more of a character arc. He's sort of like a salt of the earth guy with some demons and some trauma who kind of gets sucked into the hotel and turns bad. But that's my only complaint about Kubrick's The Shining. But I mean, you can't get any better than the tracking shots of Danny on his little big wheel going through the hallways, in my opinion, and then coming around the corner. And you just know he's going to eventually run into something, and he does, those twins. I mean, to me, that makes the movie. So anyway, that's my very long-winded explanation of why I choose The Shining.
Okay.
That was both really good answers.
So we're going to jump right into acting and characters. And since you kind of touched on that, Emma, why don't we start with you and go from there?
Sure. Okay. So I do love Danny in The Shining. I think he's so good. He's such a great little character. His acting is fantastic. But I think for me, definitely the acting is better in The Exorcist. It's just much more layered. There's each person in the film has a clear, strong character arc. From the priest Damien, the priest Damien is the most interesting to me. But from start to finish, we have establishing character shots. We understand their motivations. We understand, where they're at. Then they change. They're each presented with an obstacle. They each have a challenge to overcome. And at the end of the movie, we have a resolution regarding all of them. And I just think that's really powerfully done. And in The Shining, again, like I just said, like Jack Nicholson, who, I mean, I have no doubt he was cast for a reason. He plays a crazy guy so well. I mean, when he chops open the door and tries to get Shelley Duvall in the bathroom, I mean, he's just so good. But he's like that from the second we meet him. He's Jack Nicholson, playing a crazy guy who's an asshole. And same with Wendy. She's sort of bizarre and a little bit odd from the first moment we meet her. There just aren't the same character arcs, and the acting's just, I think, not as good.
Mia.
I am highly going to agree with Emma because Stephen King has never been shy about saying this. He does not like Kubrick's adaptation because there are no character arcs for Jack's character, and the family unit as a whole is kind of already feeling very bleak and shattered before they even get to the hotel.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to kind of be like, we're picking up the pieces, this is going to be a good thing for our family, but it already kind of feels like the family has lost all of its hope already. She's not feeling very great about this. He's already basically off his rocker crazy, so he just goes from being like pretty crazy and an asshole to like just another level of it. There's no real like, oh, he slowly gets there. And so I'd have to agree, while the acting is great and she does a great job at being, you know, very, what's the word, sympathetic and just altogether having a really bad time. And Danny does a great job too. There is so much more great subtleties in The Exorcist to do such a great job. The mother has such a sense of hope and then impending doom, and it slowly gets you there. The Exorcist is really a slow burn, I think, because the scary stuff doesn't happen until towards the very end. A lot of it is before she even starts to go really full-blown possessed, and that in itself, I think, makes the characterizations more interesting to watch. You have more time to watch those subtleties. Father Karras has a lot of demons of his own, and we follow him through a lot of that story. And so, yeah, I have to agree with Emma that The Exorcist does a better job at the characterization of the characters and the acting.
Allie.
Well, while I love Danny and Wendy and Jack, I do think I'm going to go with The Exorcist. Mostly my favorite thing other than Reagan about the movie is the priest and his mom.
Yeah.
His own internal battle is like one of the coolest parts of that movie to me. You know, he's a boxer, he's angry, but he also is feeling guilty with his mother and his ultimate sacrifice. His story is one of my favorite things just about that movie. And that gives me, I mean, Jack Nicholson is my favorite actor of all time, but I just think there's more. Somebody said slow burn, and I agree. It is a slower burn movie, and that just provides you with more story about the characters, I think, too. So I'm gonna have to give it to The Exorcist. None of my answers are as sexy as Emma and Mia's. Mine are shorter and a lot of like, yeah, I'm changing my mind. And I have ADHD, so like, it's just all over the place. So
man, just be you.
Yeah, you know what? There's nothing wrong with what you're doing.
No, there's probably people watching going like, thank God she doesn't ramble on and over and try to sound so philosophical.
I like hearing other people. I love talking movies.
Yeah.
So I love hearing your guys' point of view. So please ramble.
Yeah.
I love it.
Well, I got some things to say on this one. Yeah, further to the the slow burn, but like, I mean, to me, The Exorcist was indicative of the 70s filmmaking in that it was just slower, methodical. It didn't really have to answer to anybody, didn't care about your attention span. And though The Shining was shot in the 79, came out in 80, it does have a little bit more of an 80s vibe than as in comparison to The Exorcist on the way. Even the music is like, it's a cool music, but that's kind of early 80s, and it kind of gives that vibe. The pacing is something that I definitely, now I'm kind of go back into filmmaking, but anyways, there's two scenes in The Shining that I think, and again, yes, Kubrick was intentional. And it's funny because, someone makes a bunch of brilliant films and then we assume that all their mistakes were intentional. I don't know if that's the case, but there's two scenes that would have fixed The Shining for me. And one is the scene that I love in Ullman's office at the beginning when he's talking. If he was just less crazy in that scene, he was so subtle, but he was still crazy. He could have just been a little bit more toned down, a little bit more, just desperate for a job kind of thing. And I think that would have helped. And then the other scene is the car ride.
Yeah.
You know, it was just a profile shot. It was almost like a caricature of Jack Nicholson, a raised eyebrow, and it almost looked SNL-ish at times. Those two scenes, if he was just a little bit more compassionate to his family, you know, just a little bit nicer to Danny, you know, those two scenes I think could have been enough to say, okay, there was an arc. You know, obviously that's not what Kubrick wanted, so fine, but I think the film hurts from it. I think everybody kind of feels that, you know, that was the weakest part of The Shining. So I'm going to give actors, and it's not, and also with Wendy, I thought Shelley Duvall was borderline terrible at times. She was great towards the end because she played, I think that was her, like, you know, she played that
That's
victim.
why I love her though in the shot. I thought she was so
Yeah,
great.
I thought some of her stuff in the, sorry, go Allie.
I think it was really her. I love Shelley Duvall. I thought it couldn't have been more. I feel so bad for her. So
She
it's hard
was
to,
sympathetic. She was sympathetic. I just felt a little bit in the beginning. She was
but
a
her
little bit.
husband's an alcoholic and she's kind of on her own dealing with Danny, and she's scared, and they're trying to put their family back together in this hotel. And that's why I thought, and after, you know, towards the end with the baseball bat's my favorite scene.
Yeah. And
Like,
that's where she was good.
yeah, I don't know. I thought that was the accidental magic, if you will, with Shelley Duvall.
Okay, well, you sold me. You sold me.
She is great. And sorry, Jason, one more thing.
Yeah,
You know what?
go for it.
Near the beginning, after Danny has his little spell, the doctor comes, they're sitting at the table and she's got her cigarette and it like burns and burns and burns and burns. And you just want to ash it for her.
Yeah.
That whole scene is really well done because to Allie's point, like she's having to explain to this doctor who's like clearly going to read between the lines what happened to Annie's arm or shoulder or whatever it was. I think it's slightly different in the movie. And she's trying, it's almost like you can hear her reflecting on how she sounds, knowing it just sounds like obviously she's sort of covering up what really happened, or she's not necessarily covering up, but she's framing it in a way that's going to make it sound not so bad, almost to herself. It's like she's not even talking to the doctor, she's talking to herself, trying to convince herself that like, oh, you know, it's all good, it was a mistake. I think that's a very powerful scene, even though I agree with you generally about Shelley Duvall, except until near the end. I do really like her in that one scene.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair points. Now just jump into The Exorcist. Yeah, like, I mean, I mean, you're dealing with, you know, Ellen Bernson, who's like, again, Academy Awards and stuff like that. Like, I mean, you're dealing with some heavy hitters as well in that film. I just think cohesively it was a better casting, a better character mix. It's funny because, like, I mean, one of the things I relate to a lot is what I think I forgot which one of you was saying. It was father and his mother, like, you know, because, you know, I think they're Greek in the film, but, you know, being Italian, like, you know, that mother was my grandmother. Like I'd seen that visual, so that spoke to me, you know, and it was just like very, very very, very real. But for me, the best character in both films is Lieutenant Kinderman, who I was alluding to, that was questioning, just handling the case, and just the way he was able to play that role, and just kind of, you know, he was being a friend to Father Karras, but at the same time, you know, really digging into him, and just that cat and mouse between the two was amazing. The scene where he goes over to the house and, you know, she's like, yeah, offers him another cup of coffee or tea, I forgot what it was, figuring he's going to say no and just leave, and then he says yes, and it's just like, yeah. I love that character. That was a character I didn't know what, you know, he was going to do or say, and I just couldn't get enough of him. And, you know, and no one really talks about that character when you're talking about The Exorcist, right? So, you know, about him, frankly. Yeah, there you go. And he was like my favorite character of both films, but, and also because you know, Lee Cobb, you know, who played him, was like really, really good. anyways, I'm going to give it to The Exorcist just because I think the characters were just a little bit more just cleverly defined, and you kind of cared. I didn't care that much. Funny enough, I didn't care that much about Wendy. I cared about the situation. It was like, oh, that's desperate. That's not, but I don't know. I maybe that's just me.
I
But
agree. No,
anyways.
I agree with you. There's not a lot of like you said it really well. I think like you care about the situation. It's not like you want something bad to happen to the family, but it's hard to really feel connected to the characters
Mhm.
on a personal level in The Shining, even though we can all relate to like familial trauma and like generational stuff. Sorry, you were gonna say, Jason?
No, I was just gonna say, and I think that's to what Mia said. The family looks broken anyway. It's like even if they come back and they didn't, all these things didn't happen to them, they didn't look like they were gonna last. And I think that that's part of it, right? It's just like, I always say that, like if like there's a survivor in a horror movie and her mother died, her sister died, her father died, her kids died, all her friends died, but she kills the killer. Is life worth living she could have just died anyway, because what's the point, right? But anyways, so okay, so we're gonna go on. That was long, sorry. We're gonna go on to scare, and we're gonna start off with Allie. Or not.
Hot seat.
It depends on what scares you. I love gory horror films. And gross. I love grossness, and The Exorcist is gross. But I also like psychological horror a lot. The Shining, again, we all talk about how it's so isolating and cabin fever, and you're stuck with if I'm imagining being Danny, stuck with my not strong mother who can hardly do anything, and my scary, weird dad, and there's weird things happening to me, and I'm seeing what I'm seeing. I just, because I saw that movie at an age where I shouldn't have seen it. So I always think of The Shining as like a 7-8-year-old girl watching it. And that's kind of like through Danny's eyes. And I have to give it to The Shining. I just think the isolation, the psychological horror makes it scarier. I almost want to say The Exorcist too, though, but I have to say that if I could pick which one is scarier, Jack is unsettling to me. And I think at my age now too, psychological horror is more fun and genuinely scary to me.
All right, I'm gonna go next because I'm gonna keep it short. I thought Shining did brilliant things. Movies like that usually don't scare me. There is elements that scared me, but to this day, The Exorcist is still the only movie that freaks me out, and I got to give it credit for that, because it's nice to have a movie like that still out there, and it's the only one. I mean, other ones at times, but so I'm going to give it to The Exorcist. Mia.
Well, this will be the one that I ramble on, because it's no question for me. The Exorcist is 1,000 times, a million times scarier. I am with you, Jason. It's the only movie that still scares me to this day. I have only ever seen it twice in its entirety since I was older, because I am that terrified of it. If I hear her voice, if I see her face, she's on a YouTube thumbnail. Nope, none of it. I have nightmares about her. So like anytime we have friends over and we're like, oh, let's watch a scary movie, what haven't you seen? And he's like, let's watch The Exorcist. I shut it down. I'm like, we're not watching it. It's not. Wow. Nope. So I don't know what exactly I remember. Do you remember those jump scares that you would get on email chains whenever you would have to like sit and find, I'm showing my age here, sit and find like the difference in the puzzle or whatever, and then all of a sudden it'd be a picture of Linda Blair and that loud scream. And ever since then, like, her face has just scared the ever living crap out of me. But then somehow, probably like on an AMC horror fest or something when I was a kid, my stepdad probably had it on, so then I saw her face in color with the voice, and I am just so deeply traumatized by all of those things together that it's just, no, I can't handle it. Like I've seen it twice since I've been an adult in its entirety, and even then I would usually hide the pillow behind my face and plug my ears so I didn't hear her as much. So I know more about the movie based off of like documentaries and YouTube videos I've watched than actually watching the movie. And for me, The Shining's not really a scary movie to me. I don't know if it's just because I've been watching horror since the Blair Witch Project was my favorite movie when I was 4 years old. That's real great. So The Shining to me was just like a very beautiful movie to watch and a very interesting movie, but scare-wise, it didn't. Any movie next to The Exorcist is going to be the scariest thing in the world. So, end.
Okay, isn't it cool though to have movies that scare you? Like, because I don't scare easy, right? So movie. I kind of like that rush. Like, it's kind of cool. Emma, bring it home.
All right, no pressure. So I want to start by saying, I think what scares you the most, it depends on the age at which you first watched it.
Yeah.
So The Shining is one of the first scary movies I ever saw, and it just completely fucked with my head, like completely fucked with it. And I watched The Exorcist not long thereafter. And there are things about The Exorcist that scare me. The flashing demon face, for example, always a good one. But for me, The Shining just... the isolation, the fact that, the one person in your life, your dad, who's supposed to be this figure of like, I will protect you, I won't let anything bad happen to you. I have a great relationship with my dad, and the thought of him on a psychological level turning into a monster, especially as a child, you need to be able to trust the adults in your life to care for you. And if they're the evil ones, or, obviously Wendy's not evil, but you can't escape. Like, you only have your own wits about you. What's that? She's exactly.
Helpless, right?
She's not really a strong, she does prevail at the end, but in the book, she's a lot stronger of a character. There would be nothing scarier than that to me. And the scenes in The Shining, the bathtub lady, like, I can't believe no one has brought up the bathtub lady.
Yeah.
The bathtub lady, the dismembered twins, man, even the non-dismembered twins, the way he just turns the corner and they're standing there, and the way they talk to him, the
stuffed animal blowjob.
For me, yeah,
that part terrified me as
someone had to say.
Even that, or even the guy, great party, isn't it? Holding the drink, like the ghosts coming alive. There's just, to me, The Shining, the images from The Shining. I think, Mia, you said earlier, The Shining has so much iconic imagery. And for me, that's it. I do want to say what I loved about The Exorcist was there's a great sense of despair in The Exorcist, because it's sort of good versus your sort of primal, like good versus evil battle. The mother, for me, Demi's mother, or Father Karras's mother, passing away, him dreaming about her. I think he dreams that she's, I think it's like, I picture, and I hope I have this right, in the mouth of like a subway tunnel, like going down to the stairs, or maybe she's coming out of it. I can't remember. Or maybe he's coming. Anyway, doesn't matter. But
down.
Yeah. Something but she's speaking and no sound is coming out, or that's how I remember it.
Yeah.
And it's just that despair of like losing somebody close to you and sort of facing the void, I find really powerful about The Exorcist. But that's more, for me, that's more despair, not like delicious horror, So The Shining for me wins out in the scare category.
Cool. All right, next up is kills. And with a lot of films, this is sometimes an interesting category. With these two films, not so much. I think Shining had a kill count of like 2. And I think The Exorcist was 4-ish, off camera, for the most part. So we could probably zip through this one and see. But I think The Shining was Halloran and Jack, really. If you want to count the twins, but that was beforehand, as well as in The Exorcist. There again really wasn't too much, but maybe there's a little bit more. But I don't know if you have anything interesting to say. We'll start off. You know what? I'll start off with this one, because again, this isn't the greatest category for both these films. I'm going to give it to The Exorcist, just because whether there was kills or not, there was always that you didn't know what the hell Reagan was capable of doing, and that was freaky. So a guy flying out the window, head twisted around, like, how did that happen? You just have to think about it, and there's no way your head could wrap itself around like what happened. And that kind of gives The Exorcist the edge, in my opinion. We'll go to Emma.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a hard category for these films because there aren't that many kills, and a lot of them don't even really happen. Like the twins aren't killed on screen, even Burke flying out the window, like you don't really see much. So, but I agree with you, Jason. I think just from a horror perspective, Reagan can definitely inflict more damage. And I mean, I know it's not strictly speaking a kill, but when she's stabbing herself with a crucifix, I mean, my God. It's not a kill, but I think from a sort of bodily harm perspective, I'm going to go with The Exorcist.
Cool. Mia.
I'll go with The Exorcist just because I feel like Jack's and Halloran's deaths they're a little like, I wouldn't say anticlimactic, but going back to like being at the filming locations for The Exorcist, I've walked those steps. They are big and steep and they're scary, like on a nice Tuesday and sunny and watching people jog up and down them. So then rewatching it and being there, that's pretty terrifying because I know what those steps are actually like. So I will go with The Exorcist.
All right, Allie.
The Exorcist. And I think just because I think it's so cool that even though these movies are so legendary, there's not that many killing scenes in them. I think potentially what Reagan could do is scary, even though that's not exactly the question, but
I went there.
Yeah, well, I think that's why I'm like latching onto what you were kind of saying there. It's like the battle between good and evil, man. I hope this holy water works, and you got to hope it works when you throw it on her because she could blow you out the window. And I'm recalling another memory. What's the actress's name that plays the mother, Reagan's mother? She got
Ellen
really
Bernstein.
Got really injured, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Like
Her and Linda both did.
Sorry, Mia?
Her and Linda both did. She got Ellen got hurt when she was pushed down from the dresser scene or something like that. But Linda Blair's back was injured from the back brace thing when she's flopping around in the bed. They wouldn't turn it off, and what you hear in it is actually her screams of like it's actually physically hurting her.
God, that's
Well, it worked.
70s, man. Yeah, it
was for the good of the film.
So he was an asshole. You're right, because when you said that, I was like, oh yeah, he did totally like hurt her because he wanted her to scream like for real.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm learning a lot today, guys.
And further to that, both shots that inflicted the pain were in the movie, so at least they didn't suffer for like a blooper. You know?
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry, Allie. We sideswiped you there. Are you? So you're giving it to The Exorcist?
I'm going to give that one to The Exorcist. Yeah.
All right. So we got 2 more categories to go. And Antagonist, whereas Kills was probably not the most interesting, Antagonist could be because there's interpretation in this one, or it could be very literal. So we're gonna start with Mia.
Can we start with somebody else?
Sure. Allie.
I'm thinking about it right now. Like,
that was a cop-out, Mia.
Damn it, Mia. Just kidding. I mean, the antagonist being the hotel itself, you're stuck there, but what are you going to do? And I don't, thinking. I want to give it to The Shining again, but I almost might, just going back to the isolation part, the antagonist being the hotel and what it's doing to Jack. I just feel like you can't really go anywhere. And that is going back to an earlier answer. I said, what made that so scary to me? Like, I wish The Exorcist never really scared me. I'm very jealous. Maybe I was a little bit older when I watched the film, but I got more afraid with The Shining, just that scary feeling. And I have to point this out too, because a couple of you are from Canada. In Florida, I don't get to experience the snow, and that in itself makes it a little bit scarier too. Yeah, I don't know.
It's
I
awful.
don't even know if I answered the question.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what I should write down for your answer, and I'm debating.
My ADHD kicks in hard. I mean, I'm gonna have to give it to The Shining.
All right, done.
I can go next. I can go now.
You know what? Maybe I should go to Emma instead. This is
Yeah, go
punishment.
ahead.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, you know what, Emma, go. This isn't punishment, but let's just give it to Emma, and then we'll come back to you. Because now everybody's dying to know what you're gonna say.
Yeah, I know. You've got us all on tenterhooks, literally. Okay, I'm gonna go with The Shining because in The Exorcist, good versus evil is sort of viewed as not being about people. Like there's an eternal battle between good and evil. And like, if you're evil, it's because a demon has possessed you, right? So in my opinion, what makes The Shining so scary and such a good antagonist, the hotel, meaning like in terms of the hotel being the antagonist, is because for the hotel to be successful in antagonizing, people already have to have the capacity for evil. So what the hotel does is it kind of, the way I interpret it, it kind of it kind of gets its hooks into you by preying on your very human weakness and capacity to do bad things. And then it works through you. So it needs us to have the capacity for evil for itself to even be powerful. Does that make sense?
They're both vessels in a way. Jack's being used as a vessel, and I never thought of it that way.
It's a conduit, right? And so the hotel in and of itself doesn't have power. It needs the humans to be weak to begin with in order to exert its power through people to do bad things. Then it's able to like harness its power and sort of start, then we start seeing people like the ghosts and the skeletons in the ballroom and the party guests and the blood coming out of the elevator. But first it needs people, right? And that to me is way scarier. And part of it is that I don't believe in, because I'm not religious, like I don't believe in hell or the devil or anything. I believe that the universe is kind of morally neutral and indifferent, but that people are capable of really terrible things. Like I think good and evil comes from us. So to me, the Shining, the hotel in The Shining is a much more powerful entity for that reason.
People are
Yeah,
scared.
I do find that argument a lot. People who really don't have any religious beliefs really don't necessarily get affected by The Exorcist in the same way. It's interesting because that's pretty common. All right, Mia, we've waited.
Okay, so I'm also not religious, but it's do you think, Emma, that the hotel needs Danny just as much as it needs Jack? Because Danny has the shining ability. And I think too, like, especially in Dr. Sleep, it kind of like comes alive when they're back in. So it needs that energy. But I really do think it needs, the person that has the shining to help, I guess, be the catalyst to make people do evil. And that's a really great argument for why The Shining would be my answer, but I'm going to go with The Exorcist because you don't have to have the capability to do evil things for the devil or whoever wants to come in and possess you and cause harm. And that, to me, again, I don't really believe in that per se. I do and I don't. I have very conflicting religious beliefs, so that's a whole other story. But I think that idea is more terrifying, that you can be, the most innocent, perfect child, and now all of a sudden you're masturbating with a crucifix. And that's
fair.
Terrifying. Versus Jack's already like off his rocker. He's already done terrible things. He's already, the hotel is like, well, haha, we're gonna make this awful guy even more awful. But the idea that we're going to turn a sweet, innocent child into one of the most terrifying things possible is more terrifying, in my opinion. So that's why I'm going to go with The Exorcist.
Can I just say one thing? You made a really good point, Mia, that actually I meant to mention in my answer. So in the book, the hotel wants Danny. It's trying to get to Danny, and it's trying to, but it can't. Or it's unsuccessful.
It has no arms.
Yeah. Okay, Jason.
Well,
No,
does it?
but you're absolutely right. Because it senses Danny's power, and Danny's power makes it more powerful.
Yeah.
It wants to get its hooks into Danny, and it just can't. So it tries to use Jack to get to Danny. In the movie, that's completely unexplored, which is another failing of the movie, in my opinion. But anyway, it's just interesting that you said that you observed that.
Well, I don't read. I can't read. I can't sit down and just read a book. I can't do it. But that's something that I have kind of gathered from just watching the movie and hearing Stephen King's thoughts and things like that. I'm like, So when you said that, I was like, oh, I should bring that up, I guess.
Oh, no, I'm glad you did. Anyway,
And this
Jason,
is a perfect time to thank our sponsor, Audible, where you can listen to books for those people who do not read. And
I do like podcasts, so I bet I would love some audiobooks.
Yeah, do it. The Shining. Actually, I started listening to The Shining book last winter, and then winter ended, so I'm going to pick it up again. But also, there was a TV movie made for The Shining. I don't know, and that is very, very close to the book. Again, being a TV movie, though, it kind of lacked a little bit. But there's just certain things that didn't really work for film in the book, and they deserve to be omitted. But then there was some significant things that other people really had issues with, and most of it was Jack. So or the character arc of Jack. But anyways, my answer for this is going to be very, very simple and basic. I'm going with the devil. How does it get better than the devil as the antagonist? It's the devil. It's not devilish people. It's not bad people. It's the devil. It's Satan. Satan wins for me. Satan always wins for me. So the devil.
Not today, Captain Howdy. Not today.
Yeah. So it brings us to our last category, and I always say this, like, no good movie it could be great for an hour and 40 minutes, but if it fails in the end, it's not a good movie. And so this is a big one. I think both endings are great. We are going to start off with Allie. Bring us home with the ending. Which movie had a better ending for you?
You want to pull a Mia and skip?
Yeah, I know.
I want to. I don't.
You've come this far. Do you want us to
I'm
go?
thinking of playing both endings right now in my brain, and I feel like I'm answering The Shining so much, but The Shining, both scores are just, by the way, I don't know if score came up, incredible, which is what makes great film to me, great horror films. I'm gonna have to give it to The Shining. I want to say The Exorcist is so great too, but they go off, and I feel like everything's more okay in The Shining. The hotel still stays. Everything's still there waiting for another winter. That's how I feel about it. So I'm going to have to give it to The Shining.
All right. We're going to go with Mia.
I would have to agree. The Shining. The Exorcist has that, like, oh, everything's good now. Good defeated evil and all is right in the world. And that's fine. But for me, I'm just kind of like, that's expected and a little boring.
Fuck
so
happy
I
endings.
like, it's like, whatever. I mean, in real life, I want that to happen, but in a movie, I'm trying to, like, feel the things that I don't want to feel in real life. So I would have to say The Shining as well, because also it has that amazing shot of the party at the end. And I guess it has been confirmed that Kubrick said that it was him being reincarnate at the hotel, and it was his way of coming back to the hotel when he says, "You've always been the caretaker." Like, I guess they meant that literally as in he was before and then reincarnated into Jack and came back to the hotel. And that, before it was ever, I mean, you have to think it's 1980, the internet's not a thing, and you just saw that in theaters and you're like, what the fuck just happened? What am I seeing? Was that really him? Was it a look-alike? And so the ending for me leaves you, like I touched on earlier, with so many more questions than answers. Makes you want to go back and rewatch it, but it just sits with you. And as much as The Exorcist still haunts me, the ending is just kind of like, okay.
All right. Well, Emma, I'm going to give you the last word, so I'll just take it from here. I do love how The Shining is an ambiguous. Sorry. I do love how The Shining is ambiguous at the end. It's, for people who just watch and don't watch documentaries and don't like delve into chat rooms, and that's dating, but if you just like, you could put 5 people watching the same film and 5 people might take different elements from that ending or different points of view, and I think that that's really cool, as long as it's done well, as long as it's not ridiculously open-ended where it just looks lazy. The Shining doesn't look lazy in any way. It doesn't play out that way, and you wouldn't expect it to. So I am going to give it to The Shining, just because I do love that shot on that picture. It's I don't know, and same thing, I don't know, have you seen the movie Hoosiers? They end with a picture. I think any movie that ends with like a close-up on a picture, for some reason, I don't know why. But anyways, so I am going to give it to The Shining, but I will say this about The Exorcist. Okay, you could look at the happy ending and you could just say, okay, write it off as that, but I want to go back to the actual climax of the film and what got us to that ending, and it was pretty intense. When I'm watching that movie the first time, I'm like, okay, how is this going to end? Because she's possessed by the devil. You got like priests flying in from Iraq, and they're like, the most revered exorcists that there are, and they're dying. Like, what the hell's going to happen? Like, so I think that was an area where The Exorcist could have really fallen off a cliff, because how do you end it in a way where the integrity of the rest of the film is maintained? And they did. It was like self-sacrifice, and it was it was intense, and it was sad. So the last scene, maybe like Linda Blair skip into a car and everything is fine, but it's the buildup of that ending of The Exorcist, I think, was unbelievable. And the only reason why I'm not giving it to The Exorcist is because I just like the way The Shining left with you thinking. And I'll throw it to Emma.
Yeah, totally. I agree with all of you. I think The Shining definitely is the better ending. I think there's nothing I love more than a slightly ambiguous or open-ended ending where things aren't tied up with a neat little bow. And I think the scariest thing for most of us is that which is uncertain, unknown, like the great unknown, not having answers to questions that plague us. And so that's why I think it's so effective. And all of you have said it really beautifully, like that ending shot. What the hell? Has he always been here? Is that even Jack Nicholson himself, or Jack Torrance rather? The fact that we don't really know what happened to Danny and Wendy. We're never given any super clear indication. I mean, in theory, they could have left the hotel but not made it, right, to Sidewinder, to the town. So to me, it's definitely The Shining.
All right, so we're back with the winner of Horror Face Off, The Exorcist versus The Shining. And after tabulating the votes, it was The Exorcist with 15 points and The Shining with 17. A narrow win for Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. Any surprises?
No.
I thought it could go either way.
It was pretty close.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I thought we did both films justice. It was a tough battle, and there's there's nothing really too negative about any of these films, unlike some other films that we might do on this show. But that brings this episode of Horror Face Off to an end. I'd like to thank Mia, Emma, Allie for joining. And I think they're all going to be back for future episodes. So I look forward to seeing you. Thanks, ladies.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
That's all for now. See you soon. Stay scary.